One. Hello, thanks for tuning in tonight to Answers for the Paranormal on a cold and rainy night here on the East Coast of the U.S. My name is Bill Posey. I'm your host for the broadcast tonight, and with me on the line in his office over in Horsham, PA, my co-host, Joe Marodi. What's going on over there in Horsham, Joe?
What's going on? Well, I'll let you know when it stops raining. Over here in soggy Horsham.
Yeah.
Thanks to our guest, but we won't get into that. But oh, there she is. She's laughing. But soggy Horsham, Bill. We've had rain. So I feel sorry for those people that work outside. And I know we always start off a broadcast talking about the weather. I don't know what it is about weather that fascinates people, but it's something that you got to deal with when you go through a summer that it seemed like it was either raining on the weekend or it was 110 degrees during the week.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I am now a person of color after this last summer. After working outside, I am a person of color. I look in the mirror and I say, you are now a person of color. So weather has an effect on us.
Yeah. It sure does. Hey, Joe. Joe, you'd be impressed because I was away for 10 days down in the Caribbean, and I am a person of color as well. So
you got a tan, Bill?
Joe, first time in about 30 years that I have a tan.
If you can get a tan, Bill, anybody can get a tan.
I don't know about that.
You should make videos for encouragement, Bill.
I should. I should.
Show us your tan line.
Yeah. Well, actually,
it's a shame we're not Skyping.
I was going to get a bikini wax to wear my Speedo.
That's hot.
Please, Bill.
No, the reason I bring that up is you would not believe how many I saw on vacation. And it's pretty funny when you see people wearing...
What, wearing Speedos?
Yeah, that have no right to be wearing Speedos. I mean...
Whoa, did they fall into a time warp or something?
I think so. They fell into something, but...
Man, that's where you got to get a real dark pair of sunglasses, brother.
Exactly. Well,
yeah.
Anyway, enough about that.
Yeah.
We are Answers for the Paranormal, and we've titled our broadcast tonight PID, the latest, with our guest Tina Foster. And Joe, why don't you introduce Tina at this time?
Tina Foster, the most famous PID researcher out there. And she is the founder and procurer of plasticmaca.com. We've had her on, probably 5 or 6 times before. And she's here to share her latest research and talk about her latest book. With all that said, Tina Foster, welcome back to Answers for the Paranormal.
Why, thank you. But I do want to say that my blog is plasticmaca.blogspot.com. It's called Paul is Dead. So we're talking about Paul McCartney's death and replacement. And my new book is going to be called Plastic Maca, The Secret Death and Replacement of Beatle Paul McCartney.
Awesome.
So
we'll see. Now, I stand corrected, and I also mispronounced Maca, and I know that there are some people out there get very angry when we do that, so I apologize.
How dare you? I'm telling you.
Right up front.
Yeah, Fall would be offended, Joe.
Yeah. So we have talked about this topic before, but it's been at least a year, maybe more, because we talked about chemtrails and the Federal Reserve and vaccines, and we've done all that stuff.
All that good stuff.
Yeah, it's good times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
now, Tina, how do you find the time to do that much research on so many different broad subjects?
Well, I don't have a life.
Oh, well, that's a beginner.
Well, I don't have kids or a husband or anything, so it's basically work, and more work. It's fun though. I like it.
And you come home from work and you go into your research area and you pump out books.
Pretty much, yeah.
And we benefit from it because guys like Bill and myself work too many hours, and it's going to kill us. And Tina's going to go on living, and she's going to have to find somebody else to interview her. But until that happens, we're happy to have you back, Tina, talking about the subject. And it's this is kind of impromptu for me, certainly. Bill just emailed me yesterday about this, and he has a couple of things, and we have a couple of things of these latest developments. So we'll get into a little bit of that. But then basically what we want to do is open the floor for you, Tina, to start talking about your latest research and about your book.
Okay. Well, Bill, did you have...
What's it called?
Plastic Maca, The Secret Death and Replacement of Beatle Paul McCartney. So you guys know that I like to get all the keywords in there. That's from my training when I was getting my master's degree. They told us, use the keywords because you want people to find it. You know, don't have obscure titles. People won't ever find it. So somebody's going to come across my book at some point. But,
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, my last book was The Splitting Image, exposing the secret world of doubles, decoys, and imposter replacement. And I think we've talked about that on the radio before. And that book is more, it's kind of like, I wrote it as a background or an introduction for this Paul McCartney book. Because people would say, oh, well, they could never replace somebody. And it's like, no, they totally could, and they did. And it's, you know, you kind of have to have the background information of how such a psyop would be carried out to really accept that something like that could be done. Because this is a really ambitious psyop to take the most famous, well, I mean, this is all subjective, right? The most famous, the most handsome, the most popular musician who's being scrutinized by, you know, millions of teenage girls, especially, and just replace them right out, like right under the people's noses. That's ambitious.
It is.
And they did it, and they got away with it. Even though people were like, wait a minute, they still got away with it. It's really just mind-blowing to me, but, you know, we have proof. Mm-hmm. We have proof that it's not the original Paul McCartney. And to my knowledge, other than doubles who have admitted that they were acting as a double, like Emmy Clifton James admitted that he was General Bernard Montgomery's double. Latif Yahya was Uday Hussein's double. Norman Shelley was Winston Churchill's double. I mean, there are people who have admitted to being doubles. That to my knowledge, in this case where there's nobody who's admitted to being the double, this is the most proof, most evidence, and most proof that has ever been collected to prove that someone is an imposter.
Yep. And again, Tina, I believe on our last broadcast we had with you regarding PID, one of the things we brought up was the forensic evidence that were done by the Italian researchers who got into the whole PID conspiracy to actually disprove that Paul had been replaced and actually came to the opposite conclusion. Could you, again, summarize that for us?
Sure. So back in 2009, an article came out in Wired Italia that featured two Italian forensic scientists, Gabriele Carlesi and Francesco Gavazzini, and they were talking about how they had heard about the Paul McCartney is dead rumor, and they wanted to prove that it was wrong, that it was just a hoax, and lay it to rest forever. So they did their biometric analysis on pictures of Paul before and after the switch, which we have placed at, the end of the summer or early fall of 1966. So they got together the pictures, and they grouped them together into two groups, and they did their analysis with measurements and everything that they do. They were using computer analysis, facial analysis, and everything. And they found, at least in the article, they discussed 6 major physical differences between Paul and Fall. So we call him Fall because it's faux Paul, right? The fake Paul. And so, just one physical difference would be enough to prove that it was an imposter, and they found 6. So they found that the skull shape was different. Paul's head was rounder, and Fall's head was more elongated. And so, the song "I'm the Walrus," "You Let Your Face Grow Long," that's probably a reference to that, or at least people see that as a clue to that. And of course, your skull doesn't change its shape once you're an adult. So that is proof right there, just that one thing. But then they also found a difference in the nasal spine, and they suggested that the fake mustache, well, they didn't say it was a fake mustache, but the mustache that McCartney started wearing at the end of 66 was probably meant to conceal that nasal spine difference. And that was something that you can't change with surgery, and, it doesn't change on its own. So then also the jawline was different, and before the switch, like Paul's jawline had a curve, it had 2 curves, and then with Fall there was 1, and the difference was 6%, which was too great to be due to error. And again, that's something that can't be changed with plastic surgery. And Fall has always denied having plastic surgery anyway, so he can't really fall back on that as an excuse. Like, oh, it's plastic surgery. It's like, well, you said you never had plastic surgery, so why are there all these huge differences in your face and your head? And he also had, the forensic scientists also found a difference in the palate and the teeth. So they said that Paul's palate was pretty small, and it caused his teeth to become misaligned. So he got crooked teeth because his mouth was small and there wasn't enough room for the teeth. Then later, his mouth got noticeably larger, and the same teeth were not crooked anymore. So, like, there was this one right canine, upper right canine, that on Paul was a little bit twisted, but on Fall it was not. And they said it could not be explained because even though back then you could change the shape of somebody's palate, they would have had to have broken Paul's palatal suture and inserted a prosthetic to enlarge his mouth, and then he would have had to have worn braces for a year. And that obviously didn't happen. So how do you explain this other than it's not the same person? And people have noticed other differences, like different color eyes, different eyebrows, different hair color, different hair growth. Like when Paul's is parted on the left and then Fall's is parted on the right. And which, apparently you have a natural hair part, so that's a little unusual. And then there's a height difference too that people have noticed, and you can judge that from seeing him standing next to somebody else whose height is known. And you can see their feet, you can see what kind of shoes they're wearing, in the different comparisons. So you can't say, well, he's standing on a box or something. It's like that doesn't work.
Yeah,
Right.
they've tried saying that.
Oh yeah, they'll try anything to rationalize away these differences.
Mm-hmm.
And
Based on some of the things that you were just saying, how much, like, I've watched a number of YouTubes that employ a method that's kind of, I call it like a face over, where they have a Paul McCartney face from the 60s and someone who they believe to be Paul now, or Paul now, and they'll do a face over, like a 50% from when he was in the 60s, and the other 50% what he looks like now, and they'll superimpose the one over the other. How much stock do you place in face overs? Because so many YouTubes employ that tactic to either prove or disprove.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Dieter Bohmann actually wrote a book about the Saddam Hussein imposters, and he employed that method where he would take the picture of Saddam Hussein, like a known picture of Saddam Hussein, and superimpose a picture of a suspected double on top of that, and where they had more or less the same position, or they were facing the same direction, or as close as possible, right? And then he would measure the differences. And so, like the double might have a very small difference, but that's enough to tell that it's not the same person. And now I think they use computer, like facial recognition will take a face print and then make the calculations and then compare that to the other person to see whether it's the same person or not. Like they have so facial recognition, yeah, basically the same thing. So you can tell if somebody is the same person or if it's a double, and they can also use it to recognize somebody if they don't know who it is. They can, take they can take the database of pictures and then figure out who that person is. So there are different uses for facial recognition, but my point is that they also use those calculations and compare it.
Right.
So,
Bill,
but I mean,
go ahead.
well, I mean, you're saying like on YouTube, and I know there are people that are trying to prove it's the same person, and they will use morphs instead of like a legitimate researcher would have a picture that hold on, what am I trying to say? It's like pulling the one and then it switches to the other and you can see the differences. Yeah. And but what they do when they're not being honest is they will use a morph. So it will change from Paul and then morph into fall, and it confuses the issue. So let me see what terminology I'm looking for here. I'm sorry, I'm kind of drawing a blank. Oh, a fade. Yeah. So you have like a GIF graphic or something, and it will fade from one picture to the other. Like there's a pretty famous one that'll show like Butcher album Paul to Sgt. Pepper fall, and then it kind of goes back and forth, switches back and forth, and you can really see the difference. That when they do a morph, it takes the one picture and just slowly changes it into the other picture of the other person. And then it's confusing because it seems like it could be the same person, but they're not being honest about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that, Teen, is that I'm sure that there are a lot of people like me who really aren't computer savvy when it comes to like photoshopping, and I'm wondering when people watch these YouTubes, if they don't just like dismiss it, thinking that they're just it's some sort of a computer program that's either trying to make the point that it is still Paul, or try to make the point that it isn't still Paul. That's why I asked you, how much stock do you personally place in it? Because photoshopping has been out for a long time now. Who knows what is out there now to to make someone's point. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. The technology now would make it very difficult to distinguish between the original and an imposter. But the thing is that Paul was replaced so long ago, back in '66. And of course, they had photoshopping techniques, even if they didn't have the official programs. I mean, they still had people that go into a photo lab and could do all these dark room techniques. I mean, they had photo tampering almost since the beginning of photography itself, right? Yeah. People could be airbrushed out or in, or pictures could be recycled, or hacked together. Yeah. And that's been going on since Paul was replaced. And that's also something that the forensic scientists from Italy said. And that has caused so much confusion. And that was the intent, of course, because they want to muddy the waters about what did Paul look like, what does Paul look like. You know, they've got blended images of the two. It's very annoying because it's so much disinformation, and you have to really try to read through it.
Yeah. Tina, can you speak to, I know in a lot of your blogs, and quite a few of them, you've written about what you've called the falsification of photos of the original Paul McCartney pre-'66 being overlaid with the features of fall. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Well, a lot of pictures of Paul who had a round head have been made narrower, so kind of makes his head look longer and thinner. And this is something you see a lot. Like, for example, if you pick up like People magazine, like almost everybody in there is kind of squished together to make them look thinner. Yeah. But then, of course, their head kind of looks weird, too. But, whatever. That's people. But, I mean, this is, like, part of a psyop. And so, when they make Paul's head look longer and thinner, they're trying to make it look more like Fall, obviously. Right. But then Fall 2, they will take and make his head look rounder. So, like, if you see Let It Be on the album cover. Yeah. Yeah. Like, all of their heads, if you actually see the original pictures, and this is on my blog, everybody can go and look at it. The original pictures, you can tell that they've all been compressed, like, from top to bottom. Yes. To kind of make their faces look rounder. And I think the beard, too, that Fall was wearing, it helps to hide his face. Kind of, and you can say, oh, he looks different because he's got a beard, and it's like, well, you know what, you can go look at A Hard Day's Night, and Paul had a beard, and he doesn't look like Paul, so, yeah anyway, but, and so, there was also a picture from Memphis from August 19th, 1966, that is such a horrible, atrocious hack job. It's just very badly done. They took a picture of Paul, and they stuck, I guess, Paul's, like, the bottom part of his face, like his jaw and his mouth, onto Paul's head. Wow. And then they, like, put stubble on the face. And you can, and then they did something with the hair, like they blacked out his hair, because you can see the original Paul because it's on video and there are pictures of it. And then you can see this official picture where it has like this weird like V in the cheek where they stuck the two pieces together. And it's just really poorly done. So if they had had the technology that they have now, we may never have even known about this. So, but since I don't think they were very careful either for some length of time, because I don't think they thought people would catch on. Because, there was limited access. Like, after the switch, when the Beatles came back from their U.S. tour in the summer of 66, like late summer of 66, they disappeared for a minute. Like, they were totally off the radar. Like, they were sequester. They were not in the public eye. Whereas before, they had been constantly in the public eye.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was like, they're like, what happened to them? You know, people were saying, are they breaking up? Like, it was weird. And then, you know, they're very carefully controlled shots of fall and, you know, media manipulation and stuff. But then I think they got lax. I think they got lazy with their imposter replacement, because there's a lot of stuff out there that you can use as evidence against them. And you know what? You guys know I'm a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know how lawyers say to shut up, don't talk, don't say anything?
You're right.
I mean, I would totally tell Fall to just shut his trap, because he just says all these things that you can catch him on.
Yeah.
You can say, well, he tells all this nonsense about stuff. He was not there. He does not know things that happened in the past. Like, he'll say, like, apparently there was a story where he, in quotes, was with George Harrison in primary school when George Harrison's teacher, like, rapped him on the knuckles or, you know, did something. And George Harrison's father got mad, came to school the next day, and, like, punched the guy in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but wait a minute. Paul didn't meet George Harrison until he went to high school.
Yeah, right.
And Paul never went to that school. And then, of course, Paul never did, because not even Paul was there. So he's telling the story that he probably read about in, like, George Harrison's book, right? Oh, yeah, like, all... And the latest story that really got me hopping mad was he's telling everybody on the media how he and John Lennon masturbated together.
Oh, yeah.
When they were 12.
Right.
Or, well, I'm sorry, the story that John Lennon told, apparently, was when he was 12.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul didn't even meet John Lennon until 3 years later.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, well, he probably is telling this story because, he must have been there, because why would he tell such an embarrassing story? How would he know that?
Yeah.
It's like, he read about it in a book, people. Mm-hmm. His handlers told him, look, this is what happened. He had to learn certain things, but he gets a lot of stuff wrong, and he probably doesn't even care anymore, honestly.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, those are some red flags. Let me ask you this, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
In kind of preparing for tonight, I think I saw this last night. Someone has a YouTube, and this is a question about disinformation. You've touched on it a little bit. Maybe you want to elaborate on it some more. And how much of the disinformation out there is purposeful. I came across someone's YouTube, and I can't remember off the top of my head whose YouTube it was, but anyway, this person tried to, and this is a person who is trying to say that someone that we're going to bring up tonight is Paul McCartney, that he was replaced, and now it's this person. We'll get into that a little bit later. But then I saw something else that they posted, another YouTube, and they're trying to make the point that Jim Morrison did not die, but that Jim Morrison is now Rush Limbaugh.
Okay, because I've heard that Bill Hicks is now Alex Jones thing. Oh, God. All right.
Wow.
Rush Limbaugh is a good
I reacted the same way. I laughed out loud when I saw it. But my point is that are there disinformation agents out there? I think you've touched on it, but how bad is it really when they're trying to cover this up, that they actually have people out there who look like they're trying to prove something that you're trying to prove, but then they post something that's so utterly ridiculous that Jim Morrison is now Rush Limbaugh. It just seems very obvious to me that they're out there and they're, call them trolls, whatever. But how serious do you think that problem is when you're trying to I respect the research that you do. I think that you're genuine in what you do, but then there's people who are out there who are trying to undermine what you do for a reason. Now, how bad do you think that problem is?
It's a huge problem.
Okay.
There's, for example, that Memoirs of Billy Shear's book.
Mm-hmm.
It's fiction. I mean, it's admitted fiction. It's a fiction at best and disinformation at worst. That it has more or less hijacked the Paul is dead narrative. And people think the stuff in there is true. Like, it's fact. Like, that's really fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh my God. And I don't know if the author meant it as disinformation or he just saw a way to make money. And I meant it's a clever marketing tactic to tell a story from Fall's viewpoint and, his imagination of what that would be like. But, people think it's the truth. And then you have to kind of fight against that, or you have to contend with that, basically. It's like, wait a minute. I mean, the guy, he channeled it. I mean, he says he channeled it or something. I don't know, whatever. But the disinformation, I mean, it muddies the water. That's the intent, of course. They try to divert you, and here's an example that I had a personal experience with. My friend, I used to date him, whatever, it doesn't matter, but he had looked into Paul is Dead, and he saw the Last Testament of George Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
And so he decided, based on the ridiculousness of that movie, that there was nothing to Paul is Dead.
Mm.
And I was like, well, wait a minute. There's all this proof, there's all this evidence, something happened.
Right.
And eventually he did see it. Like, there was this one picture in particular where you can see the Beatles, like, at a press conference, and you can see Paul's chin, his throat is, like, kind of straight from his chin to his neck.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's straight, like a singer's chin is what my friend called it. And then Fall's throat is, like, high and tight and kind of rounded up. And so, like, that for my friend was enough to say it's a different person. Okay, fine, great. But how many people see disinformation like that and they're like, oh, this is a joke.
Yeah, that's a great point.
There's no truth to this.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, there's a person who disappeared, likely killed, based on my information or my research. And people are, like, laughing about it. They're, anyway.
Mm.
So, trying to get to the truth, too, is, like, as a researcher, as an author, I am constantly having to navigate these landmines of disinformation because, like, okay, one author put it in his book, a fake video where George Harrison said fall. But somebody faked that. And that researcher put in his book, and I don't think it discredited his whole book, but if you have enough of that, it's going to discredit your research.
Mm.
So that's a huge problem because,
And the other thing that happens, and not only makes it more difficult for you in your research, having to dig through all of the dirt to get to something that has legitimacy, but it also reflects on you as a serious researcher where you have people that are coming across these disinformation agents and they're posting ridiculous stuff, and then they come up on yours. Well, why would I watch Tina Foster and all the others? They lump you in with all of the other people, so I can understand that it must be a very frustrating endeavor for you.
It is, because, I mean, I care about Paul McCartney as a person and what happened to him. And I think some of these people, if they're not on the payroll, that they at least didn't get enough attention as children. And they have to, oh, look at me, and I have to have attention, so I have to come up with these new and crazy theories. just because it's different. People listen because it's interesting, but there's nothing to back it up. You know, so.
Tina, would you?
I got a couple more questions, Bill. Unless you, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no, I wanted to kind of go down the path of the theories. Tina, do you have time to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now, and you wrote about this, I guess, back in 2015 in your blog. But you stated that the dominant theory at that time was that on the night of November 8th, of course, in the song "The Walrus, a Stupid Bloody Tuesday," the story goes that Paul and the other Beatles had an argument at Abbey Road. So Paul stormed out of the studio, got into his Aston Martin, and sped off somewhere because it was a rainy night, or the roads were not in great shape. He lost control of the car, crashed it into a light pole, and supposedly was decapitated. So, like, that was the main theory that was out there in the very beginning. So, can you just talk about that, and then say what you believe or how that is disinfo?
Right. Well, that story was basically concocted by Fred Laborde, who was one of the early reporters on the story back in 1969, so like October 69. So he made up the story just based on the clues that he saw in the albums, and it's just completely bogus. I mean, I believe Paul died, and there may have been a staged car crash, but certainly not an accident, and certainly not in November, because, you know, November 9th, Paul went to France and then Kenya. So, like, and there was no studio anything during that period. You know, based on Mark Lewison's book, you can look at their studio. Like, he had it had it chronicled when they were in the studio and what they were recording, and blah blah blah. They weren't even in the studio during that time. Anyway, Fall was already in place and was already going to France and Kenya, and so that's all, you know, BS basically. But it has stuck just because it's been around for so long. Like, people think that's what happened, and in my opinion, whoever was behind it must think it's better for the people to believe it was an accident rather than an assassination, which is what I definitely lean towards. And, you know, and I also place the time of disappearance much earlier. So the other popular date for Paul's disappearance or death was September 11th. Again, based on the drum from Sgt. Pepper, you know, it says, like, you know, 1/10 he died, or, you know, people are saying that's you know, a clue that they'll say either it's 9/11 or which would either be November 9th or September 11th. And they're like totally sold on that. But in my opinion, Paul disappeared after the Seattle show on August 25th, 1966. So I'm very happy and content to say it's Paul up until then, no problem. After that, it gets very sketchy.
Okay, so after Seattle, what concerts are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about L.A. and San Francisco. So their last two concerts, basically. And there was a press conference in L.A. on August 28th, and I don't think that was Paul. The reporters ask, seems like they picked up on something, because they asked, well, have the Beatles ever used doubles or decoys? And John Lennon says, sometimes you can't tell the would-be's from the real thing. And Fall says, well, in my opinion, it's Fall. He says, our image is nothing like our image. And the reporters are like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, forget it, nothing. And it's like, well, they're dropping hints, people, come on.
Right, and didn't John give him, like, a look when he said that, like, shut up or something.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I don't remember that part, but yeah. And then, of course, the Candlestick Park, the very last concert, which you would think would be shamelessly exploited as the last Beatles concert. Wouldn't you expect that? Wouldn't you just expect them to be like, oh, last Beatles concert, like, everybody, celebrate it, but no, it's basically been suppressed. It's been like, don't look over there, look at Shea Stadium,
Yeah, right.
And then, that's a fun,
right,
and that just reminded me, recently, I guess it was the end of 2017, December, Fall was playing Brisbane, Australia, and somebody had a sign that said Shea 1965, which was when the Beatles had their famous concert there.
Yeah.
And Fall says, oh, Shea 65, that was before my time.
Obviously.
And of course it was before his time, so he is constantly telling people.
Yeah.
But they just like, oh, haha, joke. But it's not a joke, it's the truth. But
yeah.
Anyway, so so then, and I mentioned before that after they came back from from America, there was that 4 months where they basically disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
It turned up. Fall turned up in December '66. Outside of EMI Studios for this little interview on the street. I'm right, sorry. It was outside of EMI Studios, and he's noticeably different from Paul, with the mustache and the long face and everything. It's like so obvious that's not the original. But, back then, people didn't have the internet where you could look at all the pictures and watch all the video and back to back and listen to the voice recordings. Oh, that was the other thing that, we have voice prints that prove somebody else was singing songs that were attributed to Paul. So I don't know if you guys heard about the new Michael Jackson lawsuit.
Yep.
The label was selling songs sung by a voice double and selling them as Michael Jackson songs.
And they
he was singing them.
Yep.
And so that's, there's a suit right now to see if that's consumer fraud, which of course, in my opinion, it would be. But, Dr. Henry Truby back in '69, he did voice prints on, 3 songs that were ostensibly sung by Paul. It was Yesterday, Penny Lane, and Hey Jude. And he came up with 3 different voices, 3 different voice prints. So that is proof. That is proof you can take to a court. Same thing as the photographic evidence with the forensic scientist. And at some point it might become a battle between experts, but right now all we have are the experts saying it's not the same guy, but Paul, he's saying Yesterday, and that's, to me, that is evidence of Paul's talent that has never been duplicated. You can't take somebody like Paul McCartney with his talent and his charm and his charisma and just plop somebody else in his position and not have somebody notice. And people did notice, of course. I mean, this is why we're on the radio talking about it. Right. A good double you should never notice. You should not be talking about a good double. That's not a good double if you're talking about him.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this, Tina, because one of my curses is to think in contrarian terms as to what is being discussed and how many would respond to what is being said on any of our broadcasts. And tonight we're talking about Paul being replaced. So in response, I'm to what you just said about you can't just take someone with the immense talent of a Paul McCartney and plop someone else into their place and expect no one to notice. What would you say to, I think would be a reasonable response in saying that, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? He went on to form Wings, and look at all the great songs that they wrote, it seems to me that he kept going on and kept writing great songs. So what about the success of the Wings?
Well, my response would be that critics derided Wings. Wings never met with the same critical acclaim, and Fall even admitted that they sucked. I've got quote. I go back to original primary sources of my research, and I get what Fall said about it himself. He said we didn't think we were any good, and they were constantly being quote slagged off by critics. But you know what? Okay. So the talent. It's maybe a little bit subjective whether you like somebody's song or not. And I have to admit there are a lot of people who like dumbed down music. Mm-hmm. But the compositions are very different. From at least you can agree on that, right? The construction of the songs and like Eleanor Rigby versus So You, like please, come on. Let's not even close.
Where Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just commenting, one of the early Wings songs, Mary Had a Little Lamb, the composition drastically different than Eleanor Rigby.
And, this is not to say that McCartney... Now, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes because there's proof that somebody else was singing on Beatles records, like pretending to be Paul McCartney, and we know it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, Paul probably did leave behind quite a lot of songs, or at least song ideas, because he said they recorded everything they wrote. So there's tons of stuff. Like, they went back...
So there would be demos, right then, Tina?
Yeah, exactly. So they even, for Let It Be, they reached all the way back to 1963 and recorded the one after 909.
Right.
Because they're like, well, we need something. We're running out of stuff here. Uh-huh. But, McCartney, I'm willing to admit or give him credit for having written at least some songs. But I would not be surprised if he didn't have people helping him write songs, like Denny Lane, who helped write Tire. Mm-hmm. Mel Evans, who helped him write Fixing a Hole and the Sgt. Pepper theme song. And he was working with Kanye West and Rihanna, and he wanted to work with George Harrison, who said, no way. Mm-hmm. He wanted to work with... oh gosh, who else did he want to work with? But anyway, the point is that it's almost like he needed somebody to work with. Yeah. And there could have also been ghostwriters for him that we are not aware of. But, Paul wrote plenty of songs by himself. He didn't really need anybody to help him. He wrote Yesterday all on his own, Eleanor Rigby all on his own,
For No One?
I think... Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that one, but I have them in my book because that is part of my point that Paul didn't need help. Like, they were actually, the record company was considering releasing Yesterday as a Paul McCartney solo. Mm. But John Lennon objected, so they released it as a Beatles song. But it was his song, totally.
Yeah.
So, he didn't need, even John Lennon, who was very talented, singer-songwriter, he just didn't need it. So, anyway.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked you that is that, I don't want someone listening thinking that, we're doing an interview catering to our guest's point of view and just tossing softballs. And, I think that, I like to think along both lines and ask questions that I think should be asked, and I think that you just answered that very well. Bill, unless you have something else, I have something here I'd want to ask Tina.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You've mentioned several times during the interview, and I think we can probably go on for another hour. Bill, what do you think? If Tina's okay.
Oh, sure. Why not?
I'm good with it.
Bill? You okay? Yeah. Heck, it's not even 5 o'clock out in Seattle, right? So it's almost my bedtime, but Tina can still go for. She's almost ready to have dinner, but anyway. Amen. You mentioned the term a couple of times, PSYOP, obviously short for psychological operation, and in the way that, as we think about how the real Paul McCartney may have actually died, the actual causation of death, and you mentioned the term assassination. Now, when you look at the two together, psychological operation carried out in an extreme sense, you can have something that, as you said, that the false story, you believe that Paul storms out of a recording session and he gets into his Aston Martin, he goes and he gets into an accident because he's upset, right? But in a psychological operation, that can be made to look like an accident. Mm-hmm. So this is where we actually transition into the why, and we've discussed this before, but it absolutely bears repeating. So I'm assuming that you believe it was an assassination, Tina, correct?
I do, absolutely.
Okay, so the theories. Why would the original Paul McCartney be assassinated? I mean, he's just a singer. Okay, it's the Beatles. They have a tremendous influence on the pop culture. But why? People would understand taking out a political leader to further an agenda, a business leader, an economic leader, someone in a position of great power and authority. But maybe people don't really attribute that to someone in the entertainment realm. So what would you say to that?
Well, I would say it's a good start if they can imagine a political leader being assassinated, because Paul and John were just as influential as any political leader, and that was an author who actually said that back then. I don't have his name offhand, but the Beatles' influence was so immense that they could really form culture, shape culture, and lead people. And if they are not under the control of the powers that be, then that's a problem. And Paul was no one-hit wonder. He was talented, he was popular, he was established. He was not under their, he did not feel like he needed to bend to their will, in my opinion. So if you have when I said a one-hit wonder, in my opinion, a lot of one-hit wonders are people who are very talented, but they won't go along with the agenda. Mm-hmm. But they are not yet established enough to say no. So then they kind of disappear off the charts, They don't really get the lucky break. I mean, they had the lucky break, but then they didn't want to go along with the controllers, the agenda, and then they just kind of disappear again. So Paul was in a very different position from that, and he made it clear that he wasn't going to tell his fans what to do or not to do. He wasn't going to tell them to drink or smoke or not, or anything like that. And so, they weren't going to be the Pied Pipers, going into this social engineering agenda that the powers that be wanted. So I think that was one problem right there. Two, I think that Paul was a little bit of a problem because he took an interest in the JFK assassination. He talked to Mark Lane about writing the score for Rush to Judgment, which was questioning the official JFK assassination story. And he offered to write the score, and he ultimately didn't, and it is maybe because it wasn't Paul anymore, and Paul is not going to do that because he seems to me to be an NWO shill.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Paul had written the score. It seems to me to be likely that people would have gone to see the movie just because he wrote the music. And then, of course, they would have seen all of the issues with the Warren Commission report, right, with the disappearing witnesses and the disappearing evidence. And, it's a complete BS story, right? I mean, we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
2 Oswalds.
Yeah, right. There were 2 Oswalds.
Yeah.
Probably neither one of them was involved in the shooting part, anyway. But so then also the music itself too, I think, was an issue because, as you guys know, music is a powerful force.
Mm-hmm.
That can influence people. It can influence your health and your mood and everything, and it can be used for good or bad, basically. And I think that Beatles music was very positive, and they emanated love. Like the Beatles emanated love, and I think the Beatlemania, although people try to claim that it was socially engineered, I don't think that you can engineer love like that. Like, people really love the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, have somebody, they stick some star out there, I don't know, Justin Bieber or whoever, and, it just, they can't just say, love him. It doesn't work that way. You can't force people to love somebody.
Right. They try, but you can't. Yeah.
No, they try, but you can't. So to me, that's an organic thing. The Beatles actually had something that people resonated with, and that's.
Well, I still believe. I believe that the Ed Sullivan show that they appeared on. I think that is still. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill or Tina. That is still the largest percentage of viewers in history watched that program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even my father saw that.
To this day, yeah.
Wow, yeah. And that was their very first one, so there was already a ton of interest and hype before they were even really known in America. It's pretty crazy.
That is.
But, so, if you want to, the Tavistock Institute, I think, plays a huge part in the social engineering agenda. And the Beatles hijacking the band and taking them as it's almost like celebrity advertisement. So if people think that celebrities, like musicians, are not influential, then why do they have celebrity advertisement? Why do they pay Ted Danson to do some commercial? Or, he's not even close to being like a Beatle, but they pay these stars to do commercials. Why? If they're not influential, why do you pay them that much to do it? It doesn't make any sense, right? So, in my opinion, when they had Fall come out publicly talking about LSD, in '67 in June, of '67, he's the first Beatle, the first British pop star actually to talk about taking LSD. And he's kind of being coy about it, well, you're asking me about it, and I don't want to lie, and it's he totally knew. He admitted that he knew what would happen if he talked about it, because everybody's oh, Beatle Paul McCartney likes LSD. I've got to try it. I've got to get some.
Mm.
That's celebrity endorsement or advertising for a psychochemical warfare agent. In my opinion,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Timothy Leary and others piggybacked off of that.
Well, Timothy Leary admitted he was a CIA asset from '62, and this is a war of consciousness that they were engaged in. So this was all psychological warfare, operations manipulation. Tavistock Institute is the British psychological warfare division.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're the ones promoting the drug use, and they're basically, I mean, this is serving the NWO agenda. This isn't just for fun. Oh, we want to get people to take drugs so we can laugh at them. No. This is serving the New World Order agenda. This is coming from on high. This is coming from the Illuminati. We've got to impose our New World Order. We've got to break down. Before you can take down a nation, you got to take down the family, the culture, the society, the individual. You got to break them down before you can bring in your new system.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like 50 years ago they started with that part. So you take down the music, you combine the psychedelic music with the psychochemical warfare agent LSD, and you've got people who are very pliant, very compliant, and they're too busy contemplating their navels to be a problem for any of the agendas that the powers that be have got running. You know, it's like Vietnam War or anything really. Like the socialist agenda, yes, but that's really the New World Order agenda.
It is, yeah. It is.
So it's like this massive diversion technique, but you know, they were testing LSD in interrogations because it really interfered with people's thinking, reasoning, and it's chemical warfare against these people. But they made it cool. They made it cool and hip because the trendsetter Paul McCartney said it, that he liked it, or he used it.
Wow.
Bill, I have a question, unless you have one.
Nope. Fire away, Joe.
Okay. This just occurred to me, Tina. It's, you know, I can tell when an interview is a really good interview when our guest is speaking, and then just like questions are pouring out of me, and I keep looking at the clock, thinking, wondering if I can get to all these questions. So, having said that, this is just something that came to me, and I'm thinking back, Bill, to when the Boston Marathon bombing, and I'm going to connect the two in a second, occurred back in 2013, and the quote-unquote search for one of the Tsarnaev brothers was going on through, I think it was Watertown, Massachusetts, and they ordered that everyone stay inside, and they were, law enforcement was driving down the street, and this may have been after the order to stay inside, but police were coming down the street. But anyway, what was suspended were people's constitutional rights, where they could go in and look for these suspects, the suspect, with no search warrant or anything. And you know, people's houses were going into, and you know, people were coming out on the streets, and they basically applauded the police for this. They were hailing them as heroes. And I always thought that was like a test balloon. I always thought that that was something to see how people would react, not only when it was happening, but afterwards, to see if there would be any kickback, like, well, how could you have done that? And we know that you were looking for this bomber, but you know, people still have constitutional rights. And that never came. That really never came. Outside of those on the internet, who probably would be in line with our thinking that it was a constitutional violation at the time. So, having said all of that, I'm thinking, Tina, as you're talking, if you can duplicate Paul McCartney, if you can install someone in his place and get away with it for more than half a century now, who can you not duplicate? How can they not get away with duplicating anybody that they wanted to? And was going back, maybe, have you ever thought, was this a test? Maybe part of this was a test to see how long that they could get away with this, that if at some point it was all blown up, that they would come forth and, bear the consequences. But did you ever think that may have been a test?
Well, you make a good point, and it is, like I said, it's very ambitious to replace somebody who is so popular and who all the girls are screaming over. And it's like it is almost like you take the extreme of somebody who is being scrutinized and watched and photographed. Like, the Beatles were the most photographed subject in the 60s. And you replace that. If you can get away with replacing that person, you can get away with replacing anybody. Because nobody is going to go look at pictures of, Andropov or Brezhnev, with his crazy caterpillar eyebrows, No, nobody wants to look at pictures of that, But, yeah, any politician, sure, you can replace them, because who is paying attention? I mean, except for, the odd, professor or, forensic scientist or something who's like, wait a minute, they look different. Or somebody who's like Dr. Peter David Beater, who was given inside information about doubles that he talked about back in the late 70s. People are probably not going to notice, because they're not going to be scrutinizing the pictures. But Paul McCartney, all those girls, posters on the walls everywhere, and then it's like, if you can get away with switching him out, that's a coup right there. And it shows you the limits too. But now, as a test, I did think that Michael Jackson was a test, but that test was to see how different the double could be before, and still have people accept it as the same person. Yeah, in my opinion, because I'm sorry, but
no, not at all.
Right there, and people are still like, "Oh yeah, that's Michael Jackson." Okay.
And Bill, refresh my memory, and this goes along with the line of my last question. We're talking about Paul McCartney, and Tina's made the point that he has had tremendous influence, much more so than even a political figure. But when we're talking about replacing a political figure, before the election back in 2016, wasn't there an incident with Hillary Clinton where she was physically disabled and a replacement was put in for her? Was that not correct?
That is correct, yes.
That may have been Teresa Barnwell. Who was a celebrity impersonator. I mean, she's out there as a Hillary double impersonator, at least. So, I mean, it may have been her standing in. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah. But yeah, because Hillary had collapsed. It was on 9/11, wasn't it? And then
it was right around there, yeah.
A couple of years ago, 2016.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same concept with political figures. You take out the original who's not playing ball. You take him out, you put in a double who's a controlled puppet, basically. He does whatever you want. Assumes all the power and control and authority that the original had, but is your puppet. I mean, if you're the Illuminati, or if you're, the shadow government, the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, of course, they have the incentive to replace somebody, a leader, if they're not compliant.
I think this bears repeating, Tina. Someone can argue with your conclusions and be fair about it, but I don't think they can argue with the fact that the organism that was initially responsible, correct me if I'm wrong, for the whole PID phenomenon is the Beatles themselves and or their handlers, because no one put out more clues that Paul was dead than the Beatles themselves over the years, up until even the last release of a Beatles record, to my knowledge, Free as a Bird, where they showed there's no reason to show an auto accident and in England, and police gathering around. It was obviously meant to show that Paul McCartney died in an auto accident. So they continued to do it up until the 90s. I don't know if anything since. Maybe something off of the new release of the Sgt. Pepper's album. Tina, maybe you can say something about that. But yeah, comment on that if you would.
Well, honestly, I think that people noticed there was a difference, and then they went to look for the clues. So I don't think it was the clues leading the horse. I think it was I think saying the clues were the cause is kind of putting the cart in front of the horse. You know what I mean? It's like people sensed that it was a different Paul. And then they were like, well, what happened? So they go and they look at the album covers, they listen to the songs, they play those songs backwards, and they're really desperate for clues and information to find out what happened. But like you said, there are so many clues that there's no way that's an accident. Plus reverse speech, too. And, reverse speech is something that is evidence, basically. I mean, at least it's been used by police in Oregon to help with an investigation. So you can't just dismiss it out of hand. But, there are also masked recordings that have been purposely placed, obviously purposely placed. Like Revolution Number 9 is an famous example of that, where it says, turn me on, dead man. And you can hear the church music that sounds like funerary music. You can hear like a car crash. All that stuff was purposely put in there. Not turn me on, dead man, that seems to be reverse speech. But the other stuff seems to have been purposely placed.
Yeah.
And then just really weird imagery, like if you watch Magical Mystery Tour, when George Harrison is singing Blue Jay Way, they show like a weird headless corpse. Like, what is that about? Why do you put that in your little movie? Like, it's bizarre. And there are just so many clues to go through, but yeah, they purposely they put a lot of the clues in there, which to my mind is part of the Illuminati's creed, where they have to get consent at some level for what's happened. So they reveal what they've done so they can get the consent, and they also don't get the negative karma from it.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, we tell you all the time, Paul, that's not the real Paul. And you people just laugh it off. And it's like, well, okay, then you're consenting to it.
Yeah.
And then there's, okay, no harm, no foul, Because even just recently, Paul was on with Jimmy Fallon, and they were talking about going to see a Paul McCartney concert. And Paul says, well, I never saw Paul McCartney in concert. And Jimmy Fallon nearly spits his coffee out. He's like, what did you just say? Like, I can't believe you just said that. But then they laugh it off, of course, as a joke. But it's like, it says it all the time. You just got to start paying attention to it,
Yeah. Tina, can I talk for a couple minutes about George Harrison?
I will allow it, yes.
Okay. Now, it's your opinion that George was also replaced, right?
I think all four were replaced by Sgt. Pepper, yes.
Okay. So now, this is the post-Beatles breakup. And there are people who say, well, the surviving Beatles never really came out and said anything about Paul's replacement. However, there are instances. For one, there's an interview with George Harrison, and he actually uses the name Paul in the interview. There's the one where they're filming Imagine, John's video of the song, and the two are sitting around, and I think George makes the statement, well, Beatle Bill's had a rough year, and he and John begin joking about that. And then elsewhere, George comes out and says that he uses the name Fall again in another interview. So can you go into that a little bit? Like, why would a replacement George go about making comments about a replacement Paul? What do you feel about that?
Well, that is a good question. Why would the replacement be tattling on the other replacement?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, actually, other than maybe they just didn't like him. Or you can tell they didn't like him.
Yeah, and isn't that one of the theories that why the Beatles broke up is because, okay, you had this replacement Paul couldn't get along with supposedly the real John and the real George. But if we go along with the thinking that all of them have been replaced, maybe none of them could get along. Because,
right.
Mm-hmm. So I just think it's interesting that George, the replacement George post-Beatle breakup, kind of plays himself off as the real George, tattling on the fake Paul, if that makes any kind of sense.
It does, and I think to some extent that is part of the disinformation too, mm-hmm. that it's to concentrate on Paul having been replaced. Because if you think about the disinformation as many layered like an onion, it's like, okay, the first layer is that it's the same Paul and nothing ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, if you don't believe that, dig down a little bit deeper. It's like, well, okay, maybe Paul died, but it was an accident. Okay, then you dig down some more. It's like, well, maybe Paul died and it wasn't an accident, but the KKK killed him. And then you dig down farther, and then it's like, and in my opinion, you get down to the real culprits of the Illuminati, because who else really would have the clout to pull this off anyway?
Mm-hmm.
But then, if you dig down more, then it's like, oh, it's not just Paul who was replaced. It's, in my opinion, it was all of them. But that is something that they definitely don't want people to find out. So then they're like, okay, it's just Paul. If you have to dig down, then at least it's just Paul who was replaced. And that's in my opinion, that's what's kind of going on.
Mm-hmm. That
makes sense. I mean, there's. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I said that makes sense. That they try and make it seem like, okay, it's only Paul that was replaced.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, we do have photographic evidence of the others having been replaced, and different heights and all different things going on, but not nearly the same amount of proof as with Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm not talking too much about the others having been replaced. At some point I might go more into it. I did do a bunch of comps with John Lennon, and some things that people have said that were weird, like Cynthia Lennon said when they were breaking up, she's like, well, that wasn't John anymore. It's like,
interesting.
And it's like, these things can be interpreted in different ways, but in my opinion, they're also telling you stuff, but they can't just come out and say it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're just like, look at Mal Evans. Whatever he was going to say in his book,
they took care of him.
They sure did. So I think it's dangerous. I mean, Heather Mills was getting death threats, and the police were warning her that,
mm-hmm.
and she was saying, well, there was a lot of fear of the truth coming out from a certain party. I was like, well, who could that be,
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, what a mess. But, yeah. Well, okay, so you were saying there was a video with George Harrison saying Fall.
Yeah.
I know there's one where that is a fake video that some disinformation agent felt the need to dub Fall into a video. And I think it was an Australian interview. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes, that's the interview that I'm talking about, the Australian interview.
See, like, why do people need to do that? Why do they need to fake evidence? There's plenty of real, legitimate evidence. You don't need to fake evidence. And they're not helping anybody when they do that.
Right.
And then you were also saying about the Imagine video. Well, John Lennon, or, whatever, it's Lil John or not, whatever, it doesn't matter. But he said, those freaks was right when they said he was dead. So there are the other Beatles who were insinuating, at least, that it was
that was off of John's first solo effort, I believe, Tina.
How Do You Sleep? Yeah. Oh, totally.
How Do You Sleep? Yeah.
Total PID song. I mean, there's the only thing you've done was yesterday, and now you're just another day. It's like he's totally slamming Fall's music. Another day. It's like basically yesterday was good, and another day sucks. I mean, that's how I interpret it. And he even says the sound you make is the music to my ears. I mean, that's a pretty. That's a slam. But, and then Cynthia Lennon was on with Howard Stern back in 2001. And Howard Stern said that, he's like, you remember the story about how Paul McCartney was killed and replaced? And he's like, I think that really happened. I think that he was replaced by this wimpy guy. And Cynthia Lennon's like, well, he's been rejuvenated. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
It's like, I mean, they can't just come out and say it, but they're telling you. They get as close as they can to tell people without getting themselves whacked or whatever,
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that leads me to this question, Tina. And again, it's a question that I think would probably be asked or in the minds of those listening to this interview, and it's not one that Bill and I have not faced before when we have done our many shows on Sandy Hook, and we have interacted with people on the internet when it comes to the fraud that was Sandy Hook. The common charge is that why doesn't someone come forward and simply say that that Paul McCartney was replaced, like in plain sight? Why doesn't someone come forward on let's say on like a show like The View or Nightline or some other show that's a news-related show that's popular that has a very large viewer audience? So what would you say to that?
Well, I would say that Ringo Starr said in 2011 that he was the last remaining Beatle. And, it's true, right? But I don't think people realize how controlled the media is, for one. That's never going to happen.
Boy, there's a whole show right there, Tina.
Yeah, and also... And also, I don't think people realize that there are such things called threats, bribes, and blackmail. And there's a code of silence. And maybe, okay, look, like Mal Evans, who was an insider, and he had inside information. Heather Mills, too. Like, Mal Evans was murdered. He was shot to death by police. Whatever. It seems like he was set up for it, though, by his honeypot girlfriend, But, his book, his tell-all book about the Beatles conveniently disappeared. and they redacted it, and it was never published in full. And Heather Mills, too, got warned, and she was smart. She protected herself, like, by giving her, evidence to somebody in case something happened to her. But, somebody who's not, like, somebody like me who comes out and talks about all this stuff, I'm not an insider, so I don't think I'm in any danger at all. I don't care if I am, anyway, but... But somebody who is an insider if they were to come forward and say something, I think they would be in a very dangerous position. So we don't know what happened, how they were made to keep quiet about it, but something for sure happened. Because it's hard to imagine that somebody's family would go along with that. But who knows what they were told?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what went on, like how they were, what the incentive was to keep quiet. Must have been something.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Tina, before we go on any further. When you talk about the other three Beatles being replaced, John, George, and Ringo, was it to cover up the assassination of Paul McCartney, or was it something in addition to that?
I think that the Beatles were just hijacked as a band. The whole band was subverted and hijacked by Tavistock. Definitely they would have to remove Paul. And John, too. I mean, honestly, because they were the two heads of the organization. Right. And it's hard to imagine that John would have been able to go along with that. But, if the whole band is just replaced by puppet doubles, I mean, wouldn't that be easier? Like, just clean up just the whole thing, just one clean... Mm-hmm. Start over with a brand new band, the Illuminati puppet band that was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Like, they're telling you that's not the Beatles anymore. It's right there on the album cover. They've got the old Beatles and they've got the new Beatles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they've got the grave with Beatles on it.
With the bass guitar.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like definitely heavily slanted towards just Paul being replaced. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that all of them were killed. I think Paul was killed for sure. John was killed at least by 1980, right? Well, that's not John anymore, but if you believe that is John, then he was assassinated. Mm-hmm. And then there was an assassination attempt on George,
right?
Too,
right.
1999, like right at the end of 1999, there was a knife attack, which is very strange.
Yeah, that was strange.
Yes.
And honestly, I was reading that account, and I had to sit down and put my head between my knees because I was seeing stars, reading about all the blood and gore. I was just like, oh, I can't take it. Mm. But wow. It was bad. It was really bad. So you've got two attacks on other Beatles right there. So why is it so hard to imagine that Paul would also be attacked? It's just a different time. Right?
Yeah. Tina, do you believe that the moped accident was a warning to Paul?
Yes, the moped accident, that whole story is very suspicious because he was, Paul, it was Paul. He was saying that it was, in around Christmas time of 1965, and he fell off his bike, or fell off his moped, smashed his tooth and whatever, got a cut. But he was saying, it was a bright night. There was a full moon. And it's like, when you go back and look at the records, there was no full moon that night. Mm-hmm. And then there was in May of 1966, they shot the Paperback Writer and Rain videos. And he had his busted tooth, right?
Yep.
But if you go back to March of 1966, when they did the Butcher album cover, there's no busted tooth. Mm-hmm. And then there was some other event that was later, before Rain and Paperback Writer, beginning of May, of 1966, no busted tooth. So you can actually narrow down the busted tooth to beginning part of May of 1966. So it seems like it was a weird cover story for maybe he was messed up, or he was
roughed up.
He was roughed up, right? And it's possible that he said that about the full moon, hoping that people would figure out that his story was BS.
Yeah.
And that they will look into it more. I don't know.
That's a good way to do it.
The story is a little sketchy. The timing is weird, so I'm going to talk about it in my book. And I don't know for sure what happened with that, but it's like, why did he was prominently displaying his busted tooth in those videos. And he was doing it he obviously wasn't vain about it, but was he showing that tooth for a reason? Like, did he want people to see, like, something happened?
Yeah.
I don't know. This is all speculation, of course, but, something happened.
Right.
And maybe it was just the moped, but the timing is weird for it.
It is weird.
Let me introduce this into the fray here, Bill and Tina. I asked you a little earlier, Tina, about if they can replace Paul, who can they not replace? And I keep referring back to. I've referred back during the course of the show a couple times to Sandy Hook. And I apologize for that, but it's my frame of reference for phoniness.
It's a psyop,
and
so yeah, it plays into it.
Yeah, no question. And I look at the specific, and I get into the specifics. I want to call it the forensics of what we do as researchers. And my question is, how do they cover their tracks in the age of information where anybody can go to the internet and get any information that they want? Obviously, they've covered the Kennedy track, the JFK assassination, for more than a half a century. And before you answer that, maybe they don't even have to cover their tracks. But I want to hear your answer on this, because I'm thinking, when Sandy Hook came onto the scene in 2012, you had the official story of 20 children being killed, along with 6 educators. And yet you had also, in the public domain, you had a coroner who allegedly examined some of the bodies, who was doing basically 15 minutes of stand-up comedy. Mm-hmm. If anybody has ever seen that, H. Wayne Carver III. You also had parents who went on less than 24 hours after the tragedy, quote unquote, and were laughing on camera, and subsequently other parents, quote unquote, who were laughing within the next week. Now, my mind says, if you can put that on the people and have them believe that Sandy Hook really happened, then you can pass anything off to people. So my question to you, Tina, is that in the age of information, how has Paul McCartney's replacement been covered up all of these years?
Well,
is it just people being willfully ignorant?
That's part of it. But, I mean, like I said before, the photographs they started tampering with them from the beginning, from when Paul was first replaced. So you have a lot of photo doctoring. That definitely confuses the issue. There's also video tampering. So, they have, on my blog, I have a BBC interview from 1968, I believe. But you can see the original video and then how they made it look more like Paul. It's pretty shocking when you see, like, side by side, But with Paul, there is the aspect of the people, they want to believe the lie. They want to believe it because it's much better than the alternative, right?
Yeah.
So you have to contend with that. And then also, of course, it's the same old, tired conspiracy theorist insult, that they say to anybody who researches something or can see through their BS. And like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, I was like, well, great. At least I'm not a sheeple. Right. Like, to me, the worst insult would be to be called a sheeple. I don't care what you call me, conspiracy theorist. Fine. It's like, as a lawyer too, it's so ridiculous. It's like, oh yeah, because conspiracies never happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like, oh, criminals never seem to work together or to commit a crime. Like, why do we have criminal conspiracy in the freaking revised code of Washington then if it never happens? Like, come on, give me a break, people. You're really that dumb. But anyway.
No, absolutely, yeah.
And then, oh gosh. Okay, well, another thing besides the photo tampering and the video tampering is that they have falsified the audio. So you have to deal with sound engineering, studio magic, and how they have purposely sped up or slowed down recordings to make the two men sound like each other more. But if you have the anthology recordings, they have two interviews by, quote, Paul McCartney, and they sound very different. So if you have, like, Apple iTunes or something where you can play them right next to each other,
yeah,
it's so obvious that's not the same voice. Mm-hmm. And to me, like, the fact that they put it on there is, like, it's part of their way of revealing without revealing. Mm-hmm. Like, if you just happen to figure it out, like, they're putting it out there for you to figure out. But they're not just going to tell you, like, hey, listen to these next to each other and you can tell the difference, you know?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference I heard on that was yesterday when they took Paul singing yesterday and then Fall singing yesterday. And they're in different keys, they're in different tempos, Fall sings yesterday slow and morbid-like, where Paul's yesterday was, upbeat and, even though it was about about love and, but at least he sang it in a key and in a tone and a tempo that was that made you feel good.
Yeah, so I think that Paul is singing an F and Fall sings in an F sharp. So he actually had to change the key of it.
Yeah.
Because if he sings it in F, his voice is too low. Mm-hmm. Like, it sounds weird. Like, you can tell. So he had to change the key. Mm-hmm. But, it's just, like, stuff like that you have to contend with. And they also... Like, they put She's Leaving Home on Sgt. Pepper, which is Paul singing. So they mix Paul in with Fall, and then it gets a little bit muddy and confusing. And, I'm not even really sure what Paul sang after, like, what his recorded voice is on later albums. Like, no She's Leaving Home is because Dr. Truby did the voice prints on it. Mm-hmm. But I know Penny Lane isn't, and I know Hey Jude isn't Paul. Mm-hmm. And the other ones...
What about Get Back? Is that Fall?
Is that like is that Fall singing a Paul song? Is that Paul's recording? I can't tell you for sure. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who was a musician and like did all his own recording, and I asked him to do voice prints, and he didn't know how to do voice prints. And I certainly don't know how to do them, so it would be nice to get some more voice prints on these things and really determine who's saying what. Mm-hmm. But I just don't have the capacity, unfortunately. I can look at pictures, though. I'm really good at figuring out pictures, and even if they're tampered with, but not I can be fooled with the audio, studio magic, audio manipulation. I can be fooled with it. I admit. Mm. It's harder for me to tell by ear than by eye. So,
Bill, I still have a bunch of questions. We're at 8:45 here on the East Coast.
Okay, pick out your best and go with them.
Tina's around dinner time out there on the West Coast. But, Tina, the movie "Give My Regards to Broadway" came out in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. Did you see any clues in that movie?
Oh, yes.
Or soundtrack?
Oh, you know what's funny? That Fall, in an interview right around the time that movie came out, he said it was the first movie score he had written.
Oh, how about that?
It's like, wait a minute. Didn't you supposedly win a big award for the family way in '66?
Right. Uh-huh.
Like, how do you forget that? Well, I mean, he just got lazy. He can't be expected to know everything about Paul's life. Come on, cut him some slack, right? But there's also a scene in the video for No More Lonely Nights where Paul has like this big crease in his face mask under his eye, under his left eye, and it's like he didn't even bother to take that out. He's like, oh, nobody's gonna notice. Like a big crease. Yeah, it's not a wrinkle. It's not a wrinkle. It is a weird crease. Like, what? And then also, there's a part of the movie where he enters the control room, and they're like, oh, hello, William. Hello, Bill.
Yep.
And it's like, well, the guy's name probably is Bill. I mean, who knows what his real name is, but it could be Bill, because there are a lot of hints that it's Bill. There's like Billy Shears. There's Bill in the movie. I mean, there are lots of Bill clues. Okay, anyway. But what else in the movie? I don't know. Did you guys notice anything?
No, I mean, I saw it once in the movie theater when it first came out. Obviously, I wasn't thinking about these things at the time, and we had not asked you about that before, so I thought it'd probably be a good time. But yeah. No, there was a couple good things there you brought to the table. As far as movies, now we brought up the Kennedy assassination a couple times tonight, and probably most people listening tonight will be aware of Oliver Stone's movie JFK, and Oliver Stone's different theories on the JFK assassination. Now, that was a huge assassination. That was a huge shift in the history of the United States. Has there ever been to your knowledge, any attempt to bring this to the big screen, the theory that Paul has been replaced?
Well, people have done small movies. Oh, well, you know what? There was a German movie, actually. It's on my blog. I think it's just called Paul is Dead, but it's German, and it's basically just the story of the car crash and the people going through the clues and the album pictures and whatever. And then, of course, there's The Last Testament of George Harrison, which went straight to DVD, I guess. I don't know. It was at first supposedly a documentary, and then they admitted it was a mockumentary, because I think they were originally trying to pass it off as true, as just, a disinformation hit piece. But then people are like, well, this is BS, and they're like, okay, yeah, it's just a mockumentary. But I think there's another like low budget film about it, but I don't remember what it's called. Yeah. But as far as I don't know how big the German movie was, if it ever went to movie theaters or not. But that's the only potential one as far as I know. Oh, but you know what? Sleepless in Seattle did talk about Paul is Dead.
Oh yeah, it did.
And that's, to me, it's like that's another clue that it happened in Seattle.
Wow.
It's like, why?
I don't remember that.
Why do they need to talk about Paul is Dead in that movie? Like, why? What does that movie have anything to do with Paul McCartney?
Right.
And then
Bill,
yeah.
You know what?
What's that?
Tina does sound a little bit like Meg Ryan.
For sure.
Joe, is it Meg Ryan?
What's that?
Is it Meg Ryan?
Oh, you found out my secret.
We better not keep going with this because people will think we're loopy here. Okay?
I'm really like, Tina Foster's an imposter. Meg Ryan imposter.
Yeah, let's do a face over with Tina and Meg Ryan. Tina, did you ever have anybody? Now, the answer's got to be yes, but I got to ask it. On your website, and you'll give that information at the end of the show, or in general, you know, people know who you are out there. You ever have anybody come to you and say, you know what, I never believed this Paul is dead stuff until I started looking at your material. Now I'm not so sure, or now I believe. You ever have people come up to you say that?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, not in real life. Well, no, that's not true. I did actually have a few in real life. But yeah, a lot of people over the years. I mean, I have a contact. No, I have 2 contacts that or 3. I don't know. I'm corresponding with by email, and one's in Ireland, one's in England. He's getting a PhD, and you know, he said that he listened to my Spaced Out Radio interview a couple of weeks ago, and started looking at the Plastic Maca blog, and he could tell that Paul was replaced, and he sent me some very good research information, and I'm very lucky because people send me information. Like, it would be really hard to stay on top of everything if I didn't have people helping me. My little research assistant. But, you know, like on my Facebook page, and people will post stuff and keep me up to date with Paul's foibles and you know, all the stuff that he says, like, or, you know, just whatever. People help out with the research a lot, so I'm thankful for that, and I'm happy to give people credit, but a lot of people want to stay anonymous because it's controversial. You might not have noticed, but people tend to get their hackles up. You dare to question the official narrative on the Beatles. But see, the thing is that they don't understand is that I am a true Beatles fan, a true Paul McCartney fan. And if you actually cared about him, you would want to know what happened. And if you were a true Beatles fan, you should be able to tell that something happened to the original Paul. Like, why can't you tell that? If you're a real Beatles fan, like, you didn't notice a shift in, like, personality and the music, and, you know, how can you not notice that?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's
incredible.
Even when I was in high school. Well, I mean, that's when I got into the Beatles, because my parents didn't. They listened to classical pretty much. They didn't listen to Beatles, so I discovered the Beatles on my own in high school. And I was like, "Oh, what happened to Paul? He used to be so cute, and then he wasn't. Like, what?" But then later, of course, I started looking into it. And like, oh, okay, yeah. Well, you just have to deal with reality. You know, it's upsetting. It is. It's upsetting, and I cried. I cried when I realized what happened and the enormity of it. I mean, this is really heavy. But you just gotta accept reality, and then you deal with it.
Yeah. I
mean, when I first started looking into it back in 2008, I didn't imagine that I'd be sitting here writing a 600-page book about it and talking to you guys on the radio. Yeah. And, I mean, wow. That was like my way of dealing with it. Like, I'm going to expose this to the world. Like, this is my goal, because I was so mad. Yeah.
Well, Tina, I confess that they had me until I found plasticmaca.blogspot.com. So I attribute my awakening to you. And
that was awesome. Thank you.
And I have to thank you for it, too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I mean, a lot of people probably sensed something was wrong, but until it's actually presented to them, they either won't think much about it or won't actually see it. But if you can see it and accept it, hey, awesome, you're not a sheeple. I'm very judgmental about sheeple.
Nah.
You may not have noticed, but
yeah.
Oh Lord.
Tina, you said about a minute ago that you've been doing this since 2008.
Yeah.
Now, and again, this is the third time I'm going to bring up Sandy Hook. Sometimes in my research, I think, you know what? Just let them believe that 20 kids died and 6 educators died at the hands of some random kid who no one can establish his reality, number one, among all of the other inconsistencies and unanswered questions of Sandy Hook. So just let them go on and believe it. Have you ever been tempted to just say, you know what, if they want to believe this is Paul McCartney, this is really Paul McCartney, let them believe it. I'm going to go on and do other stuff.
No, I have never thought that. But see, what the thing is that I have decided I have to do, and I learned this the hard way from being in the trenches for a long time, that I do not deal with sheeple. Mm-hmm. I only try to reach the people who can actually see it. And the people that can't, I'm just like, well, you know, sorry, but you don't live in my reality or whatever. And because they will waste your time. They will make you run around in circles trying to prove the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I'm just not falling for that trap. Because there are enough non-sheeple, there are enough awake people who can see it. And in my opinion, that if you get enough people who can see it, there will be a 100 monkeys effect. And then it will be like, everyone will be able to see it. Mm-hmm. There'll be like a shift in the consciousness. And I don't know what that percentage is. I've heard 10%. I don't know. But it's like the more people who see it, the more we'll be able to see it. And I've noticed that over the years. Like when I started in 2008, there was a very small PID presence or population or people talking about it. And now it's like a lot more known, and people like Jeff Rentz and people are talking about it publicly. A lot more interest in it, a lot more videos about it. You know, Fall is actually having to deny it. He's had to be very active lately in pretending to be the real Paul, like being in the public eye all the time. It's like, oh my God, this is not 1964 guy. You know, like we don't care. We don't want to see you all the time. You're an old, ugly guy. But seriously, like he goes to Paul's childhood home. He goes and plays the Cavern Club. It's like he's putting so much effort into it. And I think it's because so many people now are seeing that he's not the original person, and he's having to kick it into overdrive. That's just, my theory. It doesn't mean it's right, but
yeah.
It's like, why is he in the news so much? It's just because to promote this dumb, like, Illuminati album that he just put out in Egypt Station with the pyramids. I mean,
wow.
I need anyway. But
I've got one last question for Tina, Bill. Unless you have one before I ask.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I've thought. Okay, Sandy Hook reference number 4, if not 5. I've thought to myself, what will it mean if one day I wake up and I turn on my local news affiliate, which is controlled by, I don't know, 3 or 4 corporations that run everything, and I hear that Sandy Hook has been fabricated. It's been proven that the news is leaking out that Sandy Hook never really happened. And then I go down to the Wawa and I buy the Daily News and I see plastered on the cover there, Sandy Hook never happened, something to that effect. I've wondered to myself, what would that mean to the world if that came out? Let me ask you this, Tina, last question. What do you think it will mean to the world if, and this is part of the question, why you keep going on, why you don't stop, if someday the headlines read, Paul really is dead? What do you think that will mean to the world? What effect will it have on the world?
Well, he is going to die. The fake Paul is going to die, and they probably will use that as a catchphrase. But if people find out that the real Paul was imposter replaced, killed and replaced, it's going to open up a huge can of worms. Like, they're going to find out about the imposter replacement agenda. They're going to know about devils. They're going to hopefully start looking for that. And if they're suspicious about somebody, that they'll investigate it more and see if they're being manipulated that way by that and being deceived by a double.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly hope that it would be an aha experience for people, and that they would see that they're lied to, for one thing. So they really need to question pretty much everything. I would doubt that they would ever publicly admit that Paul was replaced, because they would just expose that whole agenda, and they really try to keep the lid on it. They mock and they ridicule anybody who talks about doubles, even though it's completely proven fact that they exist, but they don't want people to think that. It's just, wow, that whole psyop. And I mean, I try to expose that in my book, The Splitting Image, right?
Yeah.
Like to some of the uses of a double for psyops and how they can be exploited to manipulate people. And that's basically what I think happened here. That Paul's popularity and influence was exploited to manipulate people, the social engineering agenda. And Paul wasn't going to do it, so they had to replace him with somebody who would, a controlled puppet, basically. And, we still have Paul shilling for the NWO. I mean, this guy, we haven't talked about 9/11 too much, but I mean, that's a pretty hinky story, too.
Oh, yeah.
To put it mildly.
You think? You think, yeah.
Yeah,
mildly.
But, Paul says that he said this on an interview, that he was in a plane on 9/11 and just happened to see a plane hit the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
Like, he just happened to be flying by and a plane hits the World Trade Center. What are the chances of that? And then, I know, right? It's ridiculous. It's laughable. But then he has this new album out, like we mentioned, and he has a song called Despite Repeated Warnings, I think.
Yeah.
And it's all about global warming. So he's totally shilling for this global warming agenda. Like, you people need to pay your carbon tax, or, to the UN. Come on, be good boys and girls and get with the program. Like, oh my God, is this guy a freaking climate scientist? Like, what?
I think he's chimed in on the gun.
Thanks for reminding me, Tina. Go. I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think he's chimed in on the gun agenda as well.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, cause he's a patriotic American, right? Who's going to stand for the Constitution, yeah. Oh, yeah, he was. He went down, where did he go? There was, like, some shooting that he turned up at. Oh, what was that? I forgot. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. So the disarmament agenda, too, he's shilling for that.
Yep.
But... Well,
okay, sorry.
Well, I just want to get my last thought in here before Bill ends the program. Folks, you know what? You've heard Tina tonight. You hear her passion, right, folks? Go to her website, and she'll give that information out in a second. Not only that, go back and listen to our previous interviews with Tina about the Federal Reserve, about climate change, about Paul is dead when we started this a few years ago, and vaccines as well. So, Tina is very serious about what she does, and we're very serious about the people that we bring on to be interviewed. There's just not enough time to play games, and so we trust Tina and we trust her research. So go back and listen to those interviews, folks, and Tina will give out her information in a moment or two as to how she can be contacted.
Yeah, and I'll end with this, Joe and Tina. You brought up earlier, Tina, about the label that people like to put on quote unquote conspiracy theorist, and maybe some of our listeners or some of your listeners, Tina, might not be aware, but not only do Joe and I do research, but we're also Christians who believe the Bible. And, when you look at the Bible and you see that the biggest conspiracy of all time was Satan's attempt to unseat the Creator, and to conspire with one third of the angels to have them fall and follow him. So, this is not something that is just a recent phenomena where people get together and talk about conspiracies. There's evidence
Great point, Phil.
of a conspiracy from the beginning of time. So that's my 2 cents to people who talk about conspiracy theorists. So, and with that, Tina, I want to thank you again for coming on with Joe and I again tonight. It's always awesome when we get together, and I don't know what it is. It's that Tina Foster magic or something. But
no question, though.
Yeah, when we do have you on, Tina, the show just flows so nicely in the conversation. So
it's good times.
Yeah, we really do appreciate you. And so why don't you give out your blog and your contact information and talk about your book coming out?
Well, if you insist.
Okay.
So my name is Tina Foster, and my blog is Plastic Maca Paul is Dead, and the URL is plasticmaca.blogspot.com. And my last book was called The Splitting Image, which is a primer for the doubles and imposter agenda, psyop, whatever. And it's meant to prepare the reader for my Paul is Dead book, which is called Plastic Maca, The Secret Death and Replacement of Beatle Paul McCartney, coming out this fall. But so, I mean, it's this book I'm working on now. It is 10 years worth of research and just trying to put all the puzzle pieces together, and it's been challenging to figure this out.
Uh-huh.
And there's new information in there that I have not talked about publicly because I have to save something for the reader.
That's right.
And some really and to me is pretty shocking evidence, that compelling evidence. Like, I really think that, I don't expect the sheeple to read my book, but anyone who reads this book and does not believe Paul was replaced is just being willfully deceived and wants to believe the lie. That's my opinion. They just want to believe because it's cool and fun, or not as upsetting as the truth. But I mean, there's just so much information. There are clues, and I go through practically all the clues. I mean, in my opinion, like legitimate clues. Like, I'm not going to talk about stuff that is really a stretch, like before Paul was replaced and like all that stuff. No. But definitely the evidence that people have accumulated over time, and then going into like the theories about why Paul would be replaced, which I think is really fascinating, because you have to talk about the Illuminati and the Tavistock Institute. And so, I mean, I think it would be interesting, not only for Beatles fans, but people who are interested in the New World Order agenda. And this would maybe be a different angle that they hadn't explored before. Because I know a lot of people are like, they don't think that the Paul is Dead information is important because, it's just a rock star. I mean, this was a person who had a family and friends and whatever, but they don't seem to think that's important. But anyway, I mean, they'll see how this fits into the bigger agenda. And I'm hoping to set the record straight, basically, because I think fall has really sullied Paul's legacy.
No question.
I mean, especially like just giving Paul a bad name. I mean, the inferior music. It's my opinion. Some people like his music, whatever. In my opinion, it's inferior. And also going around talking about masturbating with people. Like, Paul would never have done that. I mean, at least not talk about it, But anyway, so he's just like low class guy. I mean, he's assaulted people on the street. I just posted a video about that recently. So, I mean, it's upsetting to see Paul's image dragged through the mud by this imposter. That upsets me too. So I'm trying to separate the two men out. Like, this was Paul, and this is Fall, and don't get them confused together, you know?
Great.
That's my book, basically. 600 pages of that.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to get a hold of that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the support, for sure.
Yeah. Joe, you have anything else you want to add?
I think that Tina made the case for regaling oneself of her research. I think if there's anyone listening to this program tonight, they will understand that it's not like a YouTube that you go into and someone has graphics and they have some text on there, and you really don't know who's producing the YouTube. If you listen tonight, if you listen to the last 2 hours, you understand. You might disagree with Tina. That's fine. You might disagree with what we've said. That's fine. But I think that one thing that comes through is that Tina is a genuine person, and that she has a genuine desire to pursue truth. And in this context, it's the truth about what really happened to the original Paul McCartney. So at the very least, I would encourage people listening to check out Tina's website, get her book, read it, and draw your own conclusions. And then, you know what? Tina is open to criticism. I'm sure she will agree with that. She's open to. She's mentioned that she's received many areas of information from other researchers. So the one thing one person that writes a book does not want to do is not have someone read their book. So
yeah, right.
Whether they're going to agree with it or not. So I would encourage people who have an interest in this area. And if you're listening to this program, obviously you have an interest in this area. So further that interest, get Tina's book, share this interview with other people, and go from there and continue in contact with Tina herself, or either Bill or myself. So it's been very interesting, as always with Tina. Very interesting, and I'm sure that Tina hasn't shared her wealth with us yet, even though we made her career from the very beginning. So about 3 years ago. Answers for the Paranormal is worldwide, and she's been on for 6 or 7 times. I keep going to my mailbox and looking for a royalty check, but I haven't seen any yet. But
You get 15.
Obviously, I'm joking. It's what?
15.
It's in the mail? Okay.
Don't spend it all in one place.
That's great.
But, look, I said it about 15 minutes ago. I don't want to have anybody on that we can't gain information from, reliable information. I don't want to just go out there. We've been doing this, Bill, now for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go out there and get somebody who's just trying to make a name for themselves. And you know what? We've come across people like that.
Mm-hmm.
We've said, no, let's not pursue this area. With Tina, that has not been so. We've had her on for a number of times now, as we've said. So there's nothing to gain really here, but information and understanding of how this world really works. To me, Bill and Tina, that's the bottom line. How this world really works. It works in shadows, smoke, and mirrors. Mm-hmm. And you got to wade through a lot of stuff, and you got to get to people. You got to get to people who wade through that stuff for you, and you can trust them, and look at the information they've brought to the table, and weigh it for yourself. So I think that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years mm-hmm. with the 150, 200 interviews that we've done, and we'll keep doing it. So, look, we're going to have Tina on again, who knows how many times. So this is good stuff, folks.
Yep. Amen. All right, Tina. Again, thanks for coming on with us, and go get something to eat before you chew on your microphone there, and
chew my shoe.
let's keep in touch, and we'll have you back soon. Okay.
Definitely, sounds good. You guys have a good night.
You too.
Hey,
bye, Tina.
Cheerio.
She is fun, Bill.
Yeah, Joe, that was a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, and you know what? You know what the funny thing is? We've never done an interview where I personally have done less preparation.
Yeah.
That tells me that our guest brought a lot of stuff to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say this often, but it's unbelievable when I listen to Tina talk and you bringing information as well. And you know what? Boy, I've never heard that before. Now, I'm not going to come back on and say, geez, I've never heard what you guys are just talking about.
Yeah.
That takes up too much time to do that.
Right.
But in my mind, I'm saying, wow, you know what? I never thought about that before. I never heard that before. I've never seen that anywhere before. So, like I just said a moment ago, to me, it's always a matter of bringing information that never changes, that's reliable, that's researchable, that's verifiable, as Tina was talking about throughout the program with regards to the forensics that have been done
mm-hmm.
on the investigation of the original Paul and the replacement Paul. So what really astonishes me over and over again is the constant flow of information that we are able to bring to those who listen to our broadcasts from so many different sources, so many different authors. It's really astonishing, Bill, when you step back and think about it, how fortunate we have been and how the Lord has blessed this ministry with the information that our guests have brought through their research. And all, when it comes down to it, Bill, you mentioned it, and I thank you for that, talking about the fact that we are believers, we're Christians, and the conspiracy of the devil when it came to him taking away 2/3 of the angels in heaven. That was something that we've talked about before, and it can't be overlooked. So when we produce these programs, I would think that people who have listened to us before and who are looking for an upcoming episode or an upcoming interview will understand that, you know what, we don't mess around with people that really are novices, people that have not done research, people that really are not interested in anything other than making a name for themselves. It's, to me, Bill, as someone who gets ready for these interviews, the pressure really is that I put on myself to come up with good questions for. Mm-hmm. I never think, Jesus, this person that we're going to be interviewing, are they worthy of this interview? There's never a time that I've thought about that. That, you know what, this might not be a real good interview because the person is, fill in the blank,
mm-hmm.
not worthy of it. The pressure has always been on myself to come up with good questions to probe their minds, because I know someone like Tina Foster has done countless hours of research
mm-hmm.
into the topic that she brought tonight. So in one sense, it makes it easy for us, right, Bill, as people that produce these programs.
Oh, yeah.
to be able to have that level of trust in the people that we interview. But then again, it makes it difficult to come up with questions that are worthy of their time and the time of our listeners. So I'm thankful for tonight. And again, as I said earlier in the program, Bill, this is kind of impromptu. I can't tell you how happy I am to have spent these last 2 hours and 15 minutes talking with you and Tina about this subject. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's been the highlight of my day, Joe. I can tell you that much with what with what I've been dealing with. But yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and it's really, when you look at a broadcast like tonight, and done on such short notice, to where we've pretty much we know our guest, and we know her acumen for being accurate in what she says, and so it makes it a lot easier to just come on like tonight and just go with it. And
yeah,
and I'm sure when we listen back, it's going to maybe even amaze us a little more that we were able to put together something that is listenable, and
yes,
and good information. So and Joe, you brought up our next interview, or the next interviewee who we intend to have on, and you want to talk about next week right now?
Absolutely. Do we have a time yet? Do we have 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock?
I don't believe we have a time yet.
Well, we'll check back, and listeners check back to answersfortheparanormal.org, or Bill will give out our Facebook information. Next week, on Tuesday, October the 2nd, we are going to be interviewing Katrina Weidman, who is currently a participant in the Destination America program Paranormal Lockdown. We have Katrina for 30 minutes on October 2nd. And this is something that we've really been looking forward to. We've never been able to secure an interview with someone in the popular secular paranormal secular realm to interview.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's with great anticipation next Tuesday that we are going to have Katrina Weidman of Paranormal Lockdown, which can be viewed on Destination America, and also their past programs on Destination America's website. Katrina I think she got her initiation into on-air paranormal investigations with the program Paranormal State, which was the paranormal group that was formed at Penn State here in the state of Pennsylvania back in the early 2000s, and then they went on air with I think it was originally A&E, a cable program, but Katrina can set us straight with that. So next Tuesday, it's really something that I'm personally looking forward to, talking with someone who is out there in the on-air paranormal community who has a very large following. So we'll be able to understand from her insights how the paranormal works, what they believe as far as paranormal investigators, and some of the methods that they employ, and just maybe some of the history of what Katrina herself has endured with the paranormal and her personal beliefs. So it's, the only drawback is that it's only 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a fast 30 minutes. So I would encourage those who are listening tonight to tune in, and Bill will give that information as to how you can tune in next Tuesday, October the 2nd.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well, Joe. It's something that we've been attempting to set up for quite a while, and though we haven't had the success in securing someone before, it was good to finally be able to have someone agree to come on with us. So if you're listening tonight and you would like to listen in on that interview, you can do so next Tuesday night, October the 2nd. We will have a time shortly, we hope, that we will broadcast. So you can check that out on our Facebook page, Answers for the Paranormal. And hopefully we can get it on the website as well, www.answersfortheparanormal.org. Or if you'd like to shoot us off an email, you can do so at joe@answersfortheparanormal.org or william@answersfortheparanormal.org. That'll get you in touch with either one of us, and we'll be able to correspond more accurately with you as far as the date and time. So with that, Joe, looking forward to next Tuesday. Hope you have a great rest of this week, and thanks for coming on tonight on short notice, and look forward to next week.
Yeah, tonight was absolutely my pleasure, and boy, am I looking forward to next Tuesday.
Yeah, really in a great anticipation for that. So with that, we want to thank you for tuning in to Answers for the Paranormal. We covet your comments. Any questions you might have, again, shoot us off an email, and Joe and I would be more than happy to enter into dialogue with you. Hope you'll listen in next Tuesday night for our interview with Katrina Weidman. And if you have anything else that you want to talk to us about, again, get in touch with us. So, Joe, have a great rest of the night, and folks, we'll talk to you next time on Answers for the Paranormal. Good night, brother.
Good night, brother, and thanks to all who listened tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, amen.